Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today we're discussing the music of Supergirl. It's the latest entry in the DC superhero universe. The score was composed by Claudia Sarne. She's a British-American composer whose music spans genres between traditional orchestral scoring, electronica, and experimental sound design. And with Supergirl, she recently became the very first woman to score a feature film for DC. We're so excited to welcome Claudia for the very first time to Dolby Creator Talks. She's here in conversation with our guest host, music journalist Jon Burlingame. I'll let Jon take it from here.
Our guest today is a British-American composer whose credits include The Book of Eli, TV series including Black Mirror and Shining Girls, and the documentaries Love and War and The Yogurt Shop Murders. We're delighted to talk with her today about her new score for Supergirl. Welcome, Claudia Sarne.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Claudia, you're the first woman composer for the DC universe. How did this high-profile movie come your way?
A little bit by default, honestly. And because I've worked previously a lot with Susan Jacobs, who's this fantastic, she's, the legend that is. She's a great music supervisor. I'd worked with her on a couple of other things, one of which is the documentary just mentioned, Love and War. And she kept saying, will you submit on this? Will you submit? And I was not thinking for a second that I would get it because I'm not, And then whatever happened, things I think weren't working out and whatever else was going on. And I wrote a piece that they loved and it ended up being, they wanted to use it as a theme and it just sort of went from there. And they took a big roll of the dice, I think, using someone who's unproven in this realm.
It's interesting that in terms of gender, there's a woman editor on this project, and there's obviously a woman screenwriter. So to me, it just simply makes sense to choose a woman to score Supergirl.
You'd have thought so. I don't know that I necessarily believe in getting something just because of your gender. I think it's the right fit. The people that were on before me, very fine composers, and for whatever reasons, things work out sometimes and sometimes they don't. And sure, it had a lot of women. And it's funny because it kept sort of defaulting to women. Like the mixer I wanted to use for the record, he sort of guided me. He couldn't do it in the time frame that we needed. And so there was this other girl, Eva Reichstad, who she could do it. And I was like, well, this is it. And this is what it is. And you just roll with it. And I thought they were given, I'm not saying that I'm not a decent composer, but I thought it was brave of them to, to go for it with me. And I think it worked out really well. I got on great with Craig, most of the post-production team. It just flowed. It flowed really well.
So when you say Craig, we're talking about director Craig Gillespie.
Yes.
And I'm curious to know if he had any ideas about what music should accomplish or what music could do for this film.
I think that Craig had his heart set on a darker tone, quite a dark tone for the music, which I didn't necessarily always agree with. I think that he wanted something to hit emotionally. And I think that's where somehow, for whatever reason, the piece I wrote, it was hitting the points for him emotionally. And I think that's what he wanted to get across, was something that was emotional and, and playful, like other parts of it that are really playful of the score. And, a bit sort of tongue in cheek, which I'm hoping some of it is. I wrote really freely because I didn't think that I was going to get it. So I didn't overthink it too much. But he was incredibly encouraging and in that, to tell me not to overthink things, because normally I didn't have very much time to sort of do this in. So it was kind of by the seat of my pants, honestly, a lot of it.
And maybe sometimes that's for the best.
Yeah, which I didn't think it would be, because I'm used to prep time and really getting my head into something and sort of getting in the world a lot more. And just, I don't know, listening to things against it, seeing images and just kind of bathing in it a bit. And I didn't have that on this, so it was just go for it.
Did you know much about the character before you started this? I'm always curious to know if people have read the comic books or if maybe they'd seen earlier versions of the character, or were you starting kind of cold from scratch?
I had not read. I mean, obviously, I've seen classical superhero movies, and that's what I sort of grew up on. I didn't know a lot about the character, but I know about Tank Girl, and I know about, other kind of kick-ass protagonists that are female, and those were things that were much more in my realm of reference. So I think I have that in there logged somewhere. I didn't know too much about her, but sort of seeing the film through for the first time, I got it immediately about the sort of brokenness and the her sort of escapism and all the escapades that she goes on and stuff. I sort of felt like I understood sonically what he was trying to do with his visuals, and that's kind of where I went from.
And it is kind of interesting because this is a Supergirl we've never seen before. I mean, she's kind of punk in a way. Yeah. She's drunk a lot in the first 15 or 20 minutes of the movie. She's feeling sorry for herself. And while we understand that character, we'd never seen Supergirl look like that before.
Right. Yeah, she's not like a tussled sex bomb. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, isn't that great? I mean, I think that's the charm of it to me, was that she was this sort of imperfect character, and that they've introduced a sort of deeper layer of emotionality to something that, normally, from my experience anyway, the superheroes, we sort of don't really go into, why they are where they are, and, that kind of thing. It's sort of, we hit go from the first minute. And I think that was what was lovely about it, was being able to, sort of have different worlds to navigate, her backstory and all the rest of it. And yeah, no, I think she's complex. I think that's what I enjoyed about it more than anything, was that there was some layer to it.
What kind of shape was the film in when you first saw it? Was it mostly finished? Were they in post?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Nobody was shooting. There was, honestly, from the day I got hired, I think it was like we had 5 weeks to orchestration. So it was like really a slam. Maybe 5.5 weeks. I mean, I remember how I knew I got it was, I said to Craig, please don't give me this movie because I'm gonna vomit if you do. And then he called me and said, have you got a bucket? And that's how I knew, so I was just completely panic stricken for a hot minute. But they were editing a lot. There was a lot of effects still going on. There was a lot of that kind of stuff still going on. There was a bunch of different edits sort of going back and forth. There was screenings were going on and that kind of thing. So I think the first screening or even 2 screenings didn't have a lot of my stuff in it. It had maybe the early demo I had done. I don't really understand about, this level of film where they're still tinkering with it all the way through, because most of the things I've done previously have been much smaller productions. You have to be locked. You have to sort of really know what's going on. There might be tiny, minute changes that happen and you do conforms, but certainly not big scene changes, big whole rearrangements of things happening kind of quite late in the game.
I ask the question because I always am curious to know how much time a composer has to sort of think it through and figure and maybe sort of create for him or herself a kind of through line musically of what has to happen. And so did you have a week to just think about it, or did you have to just dive in?
It's a piece of string conversation, because sometimes it's like I did this documentary, Yogurt Shop Murders, and I was probably working on for a year, like all told. By the time I demoed on it, by the time I put together a whole bank of stuff, and I was talking a lot with the director. We were going back and forth about what was, just sonically. Wasn't even seeing film. This is just like, is this matching the mood of what's happening here? I was just seeing images. So you have something like that where it's much more in depth. It's incredibly delicate. Like it's something like that goes on to, and they don't have huge amounts of money to spend. They don't have the luxury of that, of too many options. So you really have to bring it in on time. You have to bring it in, with a certain amount of efficiency, and they're going to be tinkering with it. But you have a lot of time on something like that. And then something like this, I'm sure some back in the day, they did it in 6 weeks, they weren't messing around, and they just had to and you go to orchestration and that's it, it's done. But then the cuts were locked, and they had presumably played everything through to their director on a piano or in some version, or maybe they were just playing Mahler, next to it, and saying it's going to be that. But so this, I don't know if I'd had more time, if it would have, there were some things I would have maybe done with, but then also it was a huge lesson for me in not overthinking things, in going with just being confident in decisions I made creatively, which, I'm used to second guessing myself, really thinking about it, thinking myself down into a tunnel and not being able to get out. So it was incredibly, really insightful for that reason, to just have to think on my feet constantly.
How did you design the music for Supergirl? I'm sort of curious to know, is there an approach when she's Kara Zor-El versus the blue costumed hero, or is this just one musical theme that needs to apply to her whole being?
Craig did not want the theme to play properly until she had sort of emerged into the suit, and she had sort of walked into the character fully. And so there were a lot of discussions about that, and sort of we hinted at it earlier on when she's still in the the trench coat, and in her first fight sequence, which is this bus sequence with the Sklarians. And so we tried, to sort of fully orchestrate it more she was coming into kind of more glorious Technicolor by the end. A lot of the earlier scenes are more, they're more synth based, they're more bass driven, they're more, the first thing that I wrote on this was on that Sklarian bus sequence where she's floating in space. It's a sort of lonely piano, and it opens out, and you almost get to a theme, but you don't quite. It just hints at something when she's flying through space, and then she beats these space pirates. And so I took that. So that really was a process. When I had that, it was this little piano, just tiny, like architecture of something. And I took that and made it into the theme. And that's kind of was the genesis of what happened in the film and with the music. And I took that as kind of the seed, and I just kind of expanded from there. Just in terms of the architecture of it, you're right. It was like having to find different palettes for different worlds, for different moods, for the evolution of her as a character, and the other characters obviously as well. So it was, I don't know how, but yeah, it all came together miraculously. God's one,
and one of the things you did allude to, and I want to pursue for a second, is how did you decide on what the overall palette needed to be? Because there are clearly electronic elements here, but there's also, I gather, a full orchestra. And how did you decide what needed to go where, or if it needed to be a fully hybrid score?
I always figured it would be hybrid, because there was too much contemporary there was too much sort of, her character was too contemporary to just be full score. Like there's a bass line that comes in. It's like a synth bass that comes in at the end of the first fight sequence, with the Sklarians. And that was like, the minute I heard that sound, I was like, that's her kind of sloppy, punky kind of fight sound. And so I knew sort of we could go and play around in that, in that world sonically. We did have a full orchestra. We had a choir as well. Like it was actually incredible because I went over for the first scoring session was 5 days. And then we had 2 little other sessions that I did from here. And that was it was amazing because it was able to take these sort of nuggets that have fleshed out into pieces and then seeing them transformed by this gigantic, I mean, that was pretty life-changing for me, I've got to say. It was pretty awe-inspiring. Worked with some great people, some fabulous musicians, fantastic orchestrator, James Shearman. I mean, if were ever to do it again, I'd like more time, I think, to really get into the nuts and bolts of the orchestration, because that takes time. That's a real, that's a bake a cake moment. And
how big was the orchestra?
We had 77 pieces for the orchestra. I think we had 40 or 50 for the choir. I had like 3 pieces for the percussion. It was sizable. It wasn't nothing.
No.
It was massive as well. And real legends as well playing on it. It was unbelievable, really.
And it was at Abbey Road, right?
It was. Yeah, we had 5 full days at Abbey Road the first time. I know. It was pretty wild. It was a pretty wild thing. And also like 5 weeks from having signed this thing. So it was like,
it's hard to believe that you pulled this all off in 5 weeks. I mean, it's sort of mind-boggling to think about, given not just the fact that there's probably a lot of music, maybe an hour and a half or more.
Yeah, I think it's like 75 minutes or something of music.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of music to accomplish in a very short period of time.
Yeah. It was. I don't know how it just came together. I don't have a big team. It's me and another guy called Nick Tuba was helping me a lot in here. And then there was another guy, just helping out called Matt Cohen, who did some sort of interstitial stuff, just stuff that I could, it wasn't, I'm not set up like that. That's not how I've rolled.
The whole team thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, each to their own. Those guys, whatever.
What about some of the other characters? One of the things about Supergirl that's so much fun is that all of the characters are really colorful and interesting in and of themselves. What about Ruthie, who is sort of Kara's sidekick a lot of the time? She has her own emotional trauma to deal with. Did she need music or a theme of her own?
I did do a theme for Ruthie because more than anything, whether it ends up being fully fleshed out or fully stated at any point, I kind of need my own Bible, internally to write from when I'm doing something like that. So I had a piece written for her just on a piano, which doesn't really end up in the film, but I put it on the album just to flesh out, because sometimes also on film, you're getting, 15 seconds of something. It's not really, doesn't always lend itself to accommodating super melodic music. So, you can hint at it, or you can, but you just have it in your mind. So you have something you're coming in with something. There's some structure there. There's something to draw from. But yeah, someone like Ruthie, I tried to write something that was sort of very morally upright and, with some sadness in it and some simplicity in it, because, she's this young, bratty, incredibly idealistic character. So I wanted to have something that wasn't just random for any of the characters. It had to have some kind of through line.
So, what did you do for the bad guy, Krem, who is so evil? He shoots this adorable dog at the beginning of the movie, which in a way sort of sets the entire plot into motion. What did you do? What did Krem need musically?
So Krem was, I don't find bad guy music hard to do. So that wasn't like that was not, because it's not really melodic. It's more about the sonics surrounding them. It's more about the sort of terror aspect of it. And there were two very simple themes we did for him, which was really to do with this kind of quite grimy basses. And it was just, but it can't be so two-dimensional that you get bored of it. So there was a couple of different things, 3 different little motifs we used for Krem. On the album, it's more fleshed out into one thing, so you can hear the sort of variation between everything. But it also had to be able to move, like in the action sequences, which I had never done that thing where it's like everything's cut super back to back to back to back to back. So you have to be able to sort of meld everything in a way that feels musical and seamless. I mean, often, if I'm going to be honest, I can't watch a lot of those movies because I feel like it's like action salad. I'm just going like, I can't.
And you feel beaten up after a while.
Totally. But maybe, they're not being marketed to me. They're being marketed to, I mean, which is great. I just, I tend to I need something to lock to sonically, but that's just, me. I'm a fussy listener.
Lobo is such a fun character because that's Jason Momoa's sort of out there. You don't even know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. He's just there.
Yeah. He's just there. He's there, just the nihilist in the movie. He's I mean, but having said that, he's not in it a vast amount, but he's incredibly charming when he is. He's fun, man. He's a lot of fun, and it had to be something that was kind of quite blatant and in your face and simplistic and kind of brutal. That's kind of what the line that we did for him to sort of score him and for his entrance, his big entrance.
Can you talk a little bit about the synths that you used? I had the feeling when listening to the album yesterday that I was hearing vintage synths. That
Yes.
Some of them sounded like old Moogs to me.
Yes, they are.
And so why that choice? And was that fun?
That was super fun for me. There was a lot of old Moogs in there because that's what we have here, and it was just when we were first doing it. It was just trying to find the right palette and the right feel that wasn't overwhelming for the picture, but kind of sort of sat underneath it in a way to give it, just place it, I suppose, sonically and not be too sort of in your face about it. But that was super fun for me because I haven't, that to be able to have an opportunity to work like that again is really fun. I used to work a lot on synths and used to make a lot of records, so that's kind of playtime for me, so that was really fun.
Yeah, in a way that's where you come from, is that sort of electronic world.
Yes, I do. I mean, I was always a pianist, but that's it. That's why I got into synths, because it was, I could make a lot of sound very quickly with synths, and I started working with Atticus back in the day. I went in to play on a session, a bass synth on a session he was doing when we were children, literally. And yeah, that's how we started working together. So
I don't think you were children.
yeah, we weren't children. We were definitely younger than we are now.
And when you say Atticus, we are referring here to Atticus Ross, who is also one of our leading composers today, and your husband.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. There you go. Better or for worse.
Literally.
Yeah.
I want to ask just a quick question about Argo, which is the city that spun off from the destroyed planet Krypton. Some of the most evocative sounds, I think, on the album are those 2 Argo tracks. Can you talk a little bit about coming up with the music for Kara's Home?
Yeah, honestly, that was the most satisfying musically for me to write, because I could space things out, and I had time to develop a melody, and I do have a soft spot for doing, super kind of emotional pieces. And with that, it was the original piece that I came from, which was her theme, which was written over the back of when she's first floating in space. I took that and was able to use it for the mother getting sick, for the planet of Krypto dying, for the sort of entry story of her having this idyllic childhood, and it sort of seems very utopian and lovely, and then it sort of turns and her mother gets sick, the planet's being poisoned, and finally the main statement of the theme at the end. And that was the most satisfying, because it's like it all went together and it felt very seamless. I could develop the theme more. I could have different sonic worlds coming in and out. I used my voice a lot. I was doing like rhythmic stuff with my voice, and it was simple, and I got to use some little airy synths in there, a little bit of light strings and beautiful cello line, fabulously played. And it was just, wonderful. I really enjoyed, that was the part I think I enjoyed. It was the most satisfying musically to me to sort of hear that come out.
Yeah, and it's significant in terms of the story that's being told, because all of who she is begins there, and everything that she becomes all had its roots in what happened in Argo.
We were able to, because we could connect everything within that scene, everything could be connected. The introduction to Krypto, the loss of the mother, the motif that could follow her around was first used in that. We've used it on a little clarinet in there, and that's what was, that's kind of the bed, if you like, of everything. That was great. That was it for a composer to be able to have a big statement like that is kind of irresistible, really, because we don't really get that. Usually it's like you get, you can do that much, then you have to get out of the way.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not about you, it's really about the film. So you kind of have to piss off at some point,
So there is a lot of action in this movie, and yes. I'm always curious to know, were you able to find a way to score the action in a way that may have felt different or fresh for us?
I hope so. I mean, I didn't do it from a lot of the orchestra. A lot of the action stuff came from synths. So it came from, sequences and bass lines. There's a lovely guy I know called Sid Minsky-Sargent. He just had some beats knocking around. I took them and would play over them and sort of build it in that way. There were some beats that I had going on here. So we're able to build stuff from that from a place of that and then start sort of orchestrating on top. So we had the structure of it, and sometimes I just pull stuff out. So we were then going into the orchestral world, but we could sort of move a bit better, easier between the two. So I really actually, I didn't think I would enjoy the action stuff as much as I did. That was really fun. A lot of it was really fun. Again, it's about, being in there but getting out the way. There was one sequence that we did where we did end up using a lot of drums, like a lot of orchestral drums, a lot of what you traditionally hear on that. But I think, that's what was warranted on that. That's what the producer wanted on there. And that's what they're used to hearing. So they wanted it to feel that kind of heroic, epic thing that orchestral drums do.
We were talking earlier about the fact that you came on relatively late because they had tried out a couple of different musical approaches before you came on board. Did you get a sense going along as to what had been tried and didn't work? And did that inform anything that you did?
Vaguely, not overtly, but vaguely. I started kind of fresh. Like I sort of gathered from conversations that they wanted to score it super dark, or that had been the vision initially. And, it's just, it wasn't really meshing obviously, there's a lot of dark content in this, but it's also, at the end of the day, a superhero movie. So I didn't really hear what had been done before. The people, and I'm glad I didn't, because, as I said, I admire those composers greatly, and I didn't really want to, sort of stain what I was thinking of as well. So I did ask. I'd say to the editors, like, how was this scored before? What wasn't working? We'd have a conversation about it. But a lot of it was just, getting stuff in, maybe hearing temp, maybe just not asking for stuff without temp and just going in there and just kind of going for it.
And there was no time.
And there's no time. You can't fire me now. You know what I mean? Film's coming out in 3 weeks. No, they could have fired me.
I'm glad they didn't. You mentioned the choir, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. There are a couple of sequences that have choir here, and I'm sort of curious to know why, where that seemed to work best, why you needed a choir at a couple of points.
The choir was phenomenal. I hadn't really envisaged using a choir. I was using like synth choir, and I was using I'll do something, sometimes I'll layer my own voice and just use it like that, so it's quick for me, so I can do it, get the idea across quickly, and we can mess with it, we can put it through things, so it can become something other than a voice. Like, it has different qualities, not just my voice, anyone's voice, you could treat it. And I'm used to working with my voice a lot. So that was epic, I've got to say. And actually, it was the orchestrator who was like, no, this needs choir on it. And he was right. It took it, especially the pieces like Krypton getting destroyed. There's this one bit, it's called the silent scream cue, and she sort of, it's after there's been all this huge destruction, and she goes into space, and it's just you can feel the rise more when it's a vocal, with a big patch of vocals. There's an emotionality to it. And it's also, it holds space really well. Like, vocals tend to hold space really well. especially when they're sung in unison like that. So that was really fun. We got a lot of the bass singers as well to sing the lowest note they could sing. We used that underneath some things, especially in Argo, just to be under there, kind of giving it texture. And, just a weird, you don't quite know what you're listening to.
And sometimes it's nice to have a human quality to some of the music making that's going on, and I find it just human. I guess I find it evocative in a way that nothing else can be.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. There was one, I think she had to sing a super high A or something, and it was so beautiful. She just sang it at the top of some of the Argo things, and you're right, it was just so frail and delicate, and it really kind of captured the loneliness, and I just thought that was so beautiful, and that was great.
Is it possible to say what the biggest challenge of this whole project was for you?
Well, technically, the biggest challenge for me is always the sort of light interstitial music. Like, I don't quite. Sometimes it's hard for me to get my head around sometimes that stuff. That was, on a technical level, but I would say internally the biggest challenge was stepping up and not overthinking things. That was really there was an internal challenge in terms of confidence and self-belief. I don't really want to say that, but I've said it now. So, but it was good. I think that the challenge was stepping up every day and, not sort of sinking in. I think any musician, any composer, we sort of tussle constantly between, extreme confidence and thinking you're the worst, most loathsome creature on the planet. So I just think it's the nature of the job. Any creative field, I think we always skating a line between, just destroying everything or building everything. And I think that was the challenge on this, is not allowing the negativity to just be like, this is crap, this, what are you doing, get the hell out of here, this, you need a grown-up to come and sort this out. That's kind of, and not allowing that kind of thing mentally to go on. So that was a challenge. But then also, I think some of the lighter moments in the film I found harder, because it's quite difficult to skirt between, these different worlds. I think that's what it was, sort of blending everything so that it didn't sound like schizophrenic, so it sounded like a seamless thing, and that there was an arc to it, that there was some kind of story to the music as well. It wasn't just, but then you're also following what the picture's doing, so you're sort of hemmed in by whatever's there. And I think sometimes it's hard for me where it's like you've written a piece of music and you're like, everything's this, you're really into the sort of little melodies and everything that's happening, and then they come, they cut it. It's just so selfish of them. But they'll cut the film so it messes with what you've done, like melodically or structurally, and you're like, and not, sort of dealing. I know that's totally about me, and I it's not supposed to be about me, but it is. So that I find that was I always find that,
and it's thrilling, and it's a great creative element that helps to make the picture as successful as it is.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And so it's been so much fun to talk with you about this stuff today, Claudia. Thank you for being with us, and congratulations on Supergirl.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You take care.
Many thanks to Claudia for joining us on the podcast today. And thanks to Jon Burlingame for conducting yet another excellent interview. And an extra special thanks to our friends at DC and Warner Brothers for helping us put this conversation together, and for those terrific samples from the film's original score. Be sure to check out Supergirl. It's now playing in theaters and Dolby cinemas in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.